Hello, my name is Annette DeLu, and you are listening to The Heart of You. Today, we are talking about astrocartography. Now, if you don't know what that is, don't worry, we're going to get full on into it because, quite frankly, this is going to be sort of a new subject matter for me as well. Today's guest is Helena Woods. She's an astrocartographer, author, and YouTuber. Helena, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm so excited to talk about this.
I can't wait to hear about all of this because travel, locations, and what energy pulls you in those locations, it all fascinates me. So I can't wait to hear everything you have to say on this topic.
Yeah, there's so much to go into.
Yeah. But before we do that, I do like to ask every single one of my guests that I have on the show to give us a little bit of background on you and your spiritual awakening story.
Yeah. Well, I grew up in San Diego, California. My mom has always been very intuitive. I grew up, only child with a single mom. And when I was born, she had our synastry charts done. And
oh, how cool.
We would talk about astrology. She wasn't very deep into it, but, we'd get our charts read or we'd go get tarot cards read every once in a while as a kid growing up. So I was always very open. I grew up open to that. And I started journaling when I was really young. And when I was a teenager, I started writing, letters or pages to God, to source, to the universe, to my intuition from a really early age, and just kind of developed that connection with something deeper.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was having a hard time or going through a difficult, period in life, I would just write and connect and commune. So that kind of intuitive relationship has just gotten stronger with time. But there have been a few little random spiritual awakenings that have happened throughout those years. There was a period when I was maybe 11 or 12, I was hiking in the woods and I found this bag of crystals and sage and all of these, different witch type things in a
cool.
little bag. Yeah. And that was the first time I started learning about crystals and it was so new to me, but I was just hiking alone in the woods and I found this little pouch and that kind of got me into learning about different modalities with healing and things like that. And then there was also a period when I was in college, my freshman year, I remember doing laundry in the laundry room and I was reading Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. And there was just this moment as I was reading it where I became so aware of that feeling of stillness, that gap between thoughts, between being the observer, being the watcher of the mind. And that was my first real moment where I had that aha moment of wow, we are so much bigger than this, that sense of presence. And I think that moment where reading that book was kind of the thing that really got me into, diving deeper into intuition and all of these different modalities.
Sure. It sounds as if the universe quite literally put the things that you needed in your path. So when you found the pouch of crystals,
yeah.
I mean, how funny is that it's literally right place, right time. Yeah. And what you're doing now is astrocartography. I mean, I don't know. That seems pretty perfect to me.
Oh yeah. It's wild. And it's crazy because when you start learning about birth charts and you start understanding the natal promise of what someone's here to do in life, you can see that all in the birth chart. And I didn't really get into alignment with my natal promise until I started doing astrocartography. That's when kind of everything worked out for me. Everything flowed. Everything's been easy. There's just been this joy, this personal fulfillment. And it's all come when I activated that natal promise, which is shown in the birth chart, which is just so wild.
Oh, how cool. So let's actually dive into what is astrocartography.
Yeah, astrocartography is a specific niche in astrology. It's the astrology of place or relocation. And it's really an amazing tool to intentionally plan your travels. If you want to relocate or move to somewhere else in the world, even just a local city or a nearby town or state, or even going cross country or out of the country, it's a way to see the different areas of your life and what's going to be activated in these places, as well as the overall energy and feeling that you're really going to sense when you're in that specific spot. So it's really just a tool to kind of intentionally plan your life and to have a greater understanding of the different energies and where they are for us in the world based on our natal chart.
So as opposed to sort of choosing a place and randomly coming across a place that feels good, you're actually getting sort of the information beforehand.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, you can see a lot of things looking at the relocated chart and then also your map before making a move.
That's great. Yeah, because I mean, I know for me personally, and I've talked about this before on the show, where I've basically fallen in love with two places in my whole life. And one was Chicago, the other was Paris. I lived in Chicago for 22 years. I now live in Paris, and I'm starting to get this little pull to possibly go somewhere else, and not necessarily to leave France or Europe, but like somewhere near the sea. I'm feeling kind of that pull, but like it's not quite there yet, right? Like, you know, when you get that intuition and it's like, this is just like a little thought form or a little idea that's coming into your intuition, just as a little heads up. But I know it's not time yet because I still feel sort of resonant with Paris at the moment. But yeah, so I'm really interested in how the astrocartography map, is it a map? Is that what it is? Or is it a chart? Yeah, that would sort of give you that idea of, you know, when something actually falls out of alignment as well as the things that are in alignment.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. And the map that you can pull up, and you can pull it up for free on sites like AstroSeek or astro.com.
Mm-hmm.
But it's all dependent on your natal chart. And so when you were born and you took your first breath, there's literally a map that can show you where, you know, the angles of the planets were at that exact moment. And so there's also the chart, which is the relocated chart. So let's say you wanted to move to Paris or move to Australia, you would change the birth chart to relocate to that specific place. And you'll see the different areas of life, the energies and the themes that are happening in those areas of life for you in that location. But then there's also cyclocartography, which is looking at the timing of when you want to move or when you want to travel or relocate.
Right.
So you can see like, you know, when is a good time, or, you know, what is the energy that's transiting at that point in that part of the world.
Yeah, that makes a whole lot of sense, because oftentimes when we plan something, let's say a trip of some sort, I know that I've had this experience before where, like, you know, if it's not in alignment for some reason, the planning of the trip doesn't go well or something, you know, things go wrong. It's just not moving forward smoothly. And as you were saying earlier about when you were living your purpose in astrocartography, things just sort of flowed and everything was falling into place. And I found that very much to be true in all walks of life, in all parts of your life, which is when you're in alignment, things just flow and things just go very, very smoothly. So
yeah,
that's a really handy thing to be able to have. So how does it work? Well, like if somebody comes to you for a session, how does that work?
Yeah. So the first thing I do is I pull up their birth chart and I analyze their birth chart, you know, their natal promise, their gifts, you know, the things that can bring, you know, a lot of value and personal fulfillment for that person. And I just study the birth chart. I study the placements of the planets, the signs, the aspects, all of that.
Mm-hmm.
First, I'll look at their map. I'll look at their astrocartography map and I'll kind of note their best lines or their best energies based on their natal chart. I'll look at the map and I'll just jot down the main places I really like for them in the world based on what I think would be a good fit for them looking at the chart. And then I'll take those places after looking at the map and I'll put it into relocated charts to see. It's kind of like a process of elimination of what's the absolute best place for someone, or top 3 best places that will have everything that someone's really looking for.
So do you need to have sort of some things in mind of what you want to have thrive in your life? So let's say if I say that I want my romantic connections to thrive, or I want my career to thrive, do you have to have that sort of information before going into the session with you, or can you kind of discover that as you go throughout?
I find it really helps if someone has some idea of like what their intention is going forward with what they want to call in. Because, you know, my sessions are only an hour. And so I want to make sure, like, you know, we get the best information in that short amount of time.
Yeah.
So if someone is coming in really wanting to focus on finding their life partner or building a great community with friends, I will make sure that that's like the main thing that is, you know, is successful in those locations. And that's really looking at the descendant lines, which are, the lines on the map that have to do with the other person or the partnership, the other spouse, or just general partnership. And then also, so descendant lines are really big for meeting people, but then also seeing planets in the 11th, 5th, or 7th houses. So those are some things I'm looking for if someone has that priority. But yeah, having that intention going into a session is so great because that can really like speed up the process and finding the best place for someone.
Yeah, sure. So if somebody comes to you and says, okay, so I want my career to thrive, and I feel like I don't want to live where I'm currently living anymore, but I'm not quite sure where I want to go. Is that okay to have that sort of open-ended in terms of the location? Because you can kind of give them those recommendations based on that?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I would say a lot of my clients don't have a sense of like they're so open. So many of my clients are open to different countries. They're open to, being open to anything. And so when that happens, I will just look at the chart, analyze it, and find the best spots for their overall happiness and success.
Got it. Okay. Is there maybe one magical place or like a couple of magical places where, let's say, somebody would thrive in like all areas of their life?
Yeah, there's a lot, going into astrocartography to look at, but I would say as a general rule of thumb, the Jupiter ascendant tends to be very magical. When Jupiter's on the ascendant in the first house of the physical body, there is this, Jupiter is about expansion and good luck and blessings and opportunities and that sense of joy and positivity. And so when Jupiter's on the ascendant, there is this sense kind of like the universe has your back, the universe is supporting you. There's this sense of like also your own energy, how you're feeling is really just kind of speeding up the abundance that's happening around you. I find that when people tend to be very happy personally within them in a place, a lot of the outside tends to fall into place as well. And so Jupiter on the ascendant, those lines are really great. Jupiter lines in general are lovely. Sun ascendant can be really great as well. The sun, when it's specifically in a higher part of the chart, like the sun MC can be nice. And then also moon lines. Moon lines are more internal. They're more emotional. They're more comforting. They're kind of like that cozy sweater, nostalgic place that feels like home. I find most people tend to feel very connected and at home with their moon lines, specifically the moon ascendant. It just tends to be a feel-good place for a lot of people. But yeah, those are a few of the main ones that I see repeatedly where people tend to be very happy in.
Okay. Now, when it comes to like a location, so let's say, we're going to take Paris, for example. So you're seeing that, that's going to be a magically expansive place for a particular chart. Is there sort of a nuance within that place? So in other words, would you dial down into, okay, yes to this neighborhood, no to that neighborhood? Would you go that sort of detailed or not necessarily?
Not so much in terms of neighborhoods in a city. Because what I look at is I don't think there's even a way to do that. There's the astrocartography lines, which you'll see, on free software. It's those lines those longitudinal lines that are going down through the map. And those radiate up to 600 miles. So you could be, that line could be in the ocean, but if you're, along the coast, you could still be with an orb and feeling that energy of that line.
I see.
But then there's also parans, which are the horizontal latitudinal crossings. And those go through like specific cities, specific regions in places. So we can even fine tune like which cities to go to, as well as local space lines, which are more crossings. But in terms of neighborhoods within a city, not so much.
Okay, got it.
There is this ability to like go east or west, being west of a line typically is best for astrocartography. But yeah, specific neighborhoods in a city, it's not, we're not able to find that.
That's good to know, because if that's not the case, if the general energy is sort of overall, so meaning it's going to be overall in this general area, then I think that could give people that peace of mind that they're not going to have to worry about, oh my gosh, I have to be careful about where I'm exactly getting an apartment and things like that, because that's something that we talked about in a previous episode about Feng Shui, actually. So I had a guest on about Feng Shui, and so she was talking about the energy and choosing an apartment or a neighborhood and things like that, and getting down deep into that like really tiny, minute detail. And the one thing I was saying, especially about living in France and living in Paris specifically, is that it is notoriously difficult to find an apartment. So obviously you can be in your beautiful manifesting energy, which I was when I found this apartment, but like, sometimes you can't pick the exact right place from an energetic standpoint. So it's nice to know that there's that, in astrocartography, there's sort of a lot of wiggle room, so to speak, it sounds like.
Oh, definitely. And, all of the lines, they radiate out. So you never have to be directly on a line or living like smack dab in the middle of a crossing. And honestly, I always tell people, I would avoid living smack dab on a line unless it's really amazing in your chart. But oftentimes it feels very intense. It's kind of like turning up the dial on a planet's energy, like up to 100. It can feel very overwhelming sometimes. So being, 100 miles off a line is really nice. And that's the thing about astrocartography. We're measuring vibration. We're measuring energy. So you could be in the general area of a place and still feel that.
It's like you're cozying up to the area. You're not sitting like directly in its lap,
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
So can you actually tell me about your process when you moved? Because I know you moved from New York to Biarritz here in France. So what was your process in discovering that this was the place for you?
Oh, yeah. I mean, well, for me, I'm kind of in a situation where I'm following my husband for his job. So, we kind of go where the job is. So I can't really intentionally, pick where we go, unfortunately. But, I do a lot of solo travel. I travel a lot by myself, throughout the year. I'll just go for a week or two by myself just to kind of experience the energy of different places along with the transits.
Sure.
Yeah. So, I mean, I discovered astrocartography back in 2018. And by that point, I had already, I'd lived in Egypt. I'd lived in all these different places in the world, traveled all across the world, backpacking and things like that. And so I had already these very specific memories and experiences living on these lines. And it was when I moved to my Venus IC line in Strasbourg in France that I felt so at home. I felt so peaceful, so like just this energy shift took over me when I moved to France, to the specific region of Alsace. And I just felt so appreciative. And so I slowed my life down. I got really into slow living and I started, making videos and creating on YouTube and, sharing that journey. And it was there that I started learning about astrocartography because the energy shift I felt from New York, which was a Mercury descendant line, it was very busy. Mercury is very fast, very rushed. There's a lot of informational processing, which is great. But the shift from Mercury to Venus was so stark. And also going from a Mars ascendant, which is fiery and a bit assertive and aggressive and, it's a bit hot, fiery energy. And so going from that line in Egypt to then, France, it was such a huge contrast that I was so fascinated. Like, why am I feeling so differently? Why does this place feel differently? And to me, but also, why do other people who come to Strasbourg not like it? Or why do some people not love this area, but I feel like this place is home and is perfect on every level? And so that's how I got into astrocartography, is because the experiences I felt, the things I had experienced there, but also the energy of how I felt in these different locations, I realized how personal it was to each person. And it all depends on the natal chart. Yeah. And now where I am now, I lived on my Saturn ascendant line this summer and that was brutal. And then now I'm on my Mercury IC line. I'm living on the Mercury line again, which is great for the work I'm doing. Mercury IC is great for, working from home, having a business from home, sharing information and communicating with others from home. So it's a great spot to be in at the moment. But I'm definitely dreaming of going back to my Venus IC line and settling down there at some point.
I can imagine from what you're describing that if you are living in a place right now that is, let's say, not the most optimal for your chart, that there are ways in which you can make it work for you.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the thing about astrology and astrocartography in general is that nothing is really good or bad. Everything is preferable or unpreferable. There's good and bad to every place. Sometimes someone will really want to go to one part of the world and I'll see their relocated chart and it looks amazing for the career, but it looks hard for relationships. Or maybe for one person, the career's not doing so great, but their personal life and their home life is so awesome. So, the thing about looking at this is that we can kind of, see what are the pros and cons of each place. And if we want, we can travel to different locations, to get that inspiration or to get that other thing that we need for where we're living. But yeah, definitely. I mean, we can definitely kind of see all the pros and cons and kind of get a bit of each thing from each place.
So then when it's time for you to let's say, change places. So
Mhm.
if you're, and I'm speaking specifically of moving here, I know that when it comes to travel is, it can be a much shorter time frame. So you don't necessarily have to worry about the energy shifting. So like, okay, I've overstayed that energy and I need to sort of move somewhere else. This is more in terms of relocation. So how often do you find that somebody needs to relocate after they have, let's say, moved to a place that is really optimal for their chart? How often does that change?
Yeah, I guess it depends on the person. Sometimes people will love where they live and they'll just settle there and they'll be very happy there. But I find intuitively, we all know when we've gotten everything we need from a place.
Yeah.
Like we just sense it. We can feel when everything we were supposed to learn from a place or the people we were supposed to meet in a certain place, we kind of can sense when that time is up. And, every client that comes to me, they have that knowing, they have that gut feeling of, I feel I'm supposed to leave, but where? That's always the question.
Right.
And so the big thing about the cosmos and astrology is that it's not causing anything to happen. Like when we have a transit happening that maybe propels us to move, it's not causing us to want to move, but it's reflecting the intuitive desire that we are already feeling. Astrology is a mirror. It's signifying that which is already going on. And we can commune with that at any time, just by living intuitively and connecting with our inner voice. So yeah, it's kind of just like listening to your feelings, listening to when you sense like your time is finished somewhere, and then going to the next place that's aligned and that has a lot of those requirements or those things that you're looking for in the next place. Yeah, I also find, generally speaking, like there are certain transits that can happen in a person's life where it's like they really need to shift things, like Uranus squares. I get a lot of clients that are going through Uranus square transits where it's like they are literally packing up their bags and moving to a different country. And it's like that is the huge change that they have to go, with in life. And so, yeah, it depends on a lot of things. But I think just listening to yourself and listening to your inner voice. And when a time is up somewhere, just following that.
Yeah. I love that description that you had because I often think of astrology as like a bat signal, like a Batman, like bat signal. Like you already sort of have that inkling, but then the astrology tells you, yes, you are correct. Like, yes, this is what you need to do.
Oh, yeah.
It's something that I find is really good in terms of being able to pull back from your, let's say, your fears or your worries or anything else. It just gives you that, oh yeah, okay, so this is not just my ego or this is not just my fears. Like, yes, I'm actually feeling this,
Yeah. And just honoring that and honoring your energy and leading with that courage. It takes a lot of courage to just trust yourself, to trust your intuitive gut feelings. But the more you do it, the more you rely and honor that little voice within you, the more that communication kind of gets louder and it becomes more obvious and more apparent to the point that you just start relying on it. You just start trusting those gut feelings. You don't second guess them. You don't doubt them. You just go. And, that can look like pivoting or moving a lot or changing your mind or doing different things. But that's that trust, and it's such a beautiful life when you've cultivated that relationship, but it just takes the repetition. And it's really a habit. It's really a habit of consistently relying on it and not doubting it when it comes up.
Right. Let's shift a little bit from relocation to vacations, like one of my favorite subjects.
Yeah.
Okay. So I want to go on vacation and I'm trying to figure out like what the best place is for me to go. Maybe let's say I know I want to go on a beach vacation, but I'm not quite sure where. Like, what is that process? Like, what would that look like within the session with you?
Yeah, I love to see some sort of activation in the fifth house. The fifth house is recreational fun, enjoyment, pleasure. It's just the childlike having fun energy. I always love to see a good planet in the fifth house if possible. I also, for anyone who wants to vacation and have like that relaxing beach vibe, I always recommend Neptune lines. Depending on how it is in the chart, of course, but Neptune lines in general tend to be very soothing, very peaceful, very reflective, very just like, it's like, beach vibes. It's very go with the flow. It could be very spiritual. Specifically, Neptune IC lines are really lovely for that. And then also Venus lines are really great for vacations, I find. Especially if you're going with a partner or traveling with someone, Venus descendant lines are great for like little honeymoon vacations. And if you're going solo, Venus ascendant. So many people tend to love vacationing on Venus ascendant lines. just for like, shopping and facials and self-care and getting a massage and that kind of energy. Moon lines as well. But yeah, those are the main lines I look at. And then also I look at the parans, Venus, Neptune is really a great pairing for the paran in certain spots. And the moon, Jupiter can be really magical as well.
So what is a paran, by the way, just out of curiosity?
A paran is when it's a latitudinal crossing. So it's like a line that goes straight through the globe horizontally. And they have an orb about 70 miles. So you kind of have to be very close to one to get the effects of it. And the energy of a paran is very dramatic. It's really felt. It can, if you're living on a great main astrocartography line, but you're living on a hard paran, that one hard paran can throw off the whole area.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, but they're formed from crossing. So when two astrocartography lines are crossing, they form at that point in the world, they form a latitudinal horizontal line that stretches across the globe.
Okay. All right, great. Thank you for that explanation, because you had mentioned that term a couple of times and I was like, I actually don't even know what that is.
Oh yeah.
And that's not surprising. So the people who know me well know that for me, I'm fascinated by astrology. I love it. It is not my gift. And so whenever astrology terms come into play, like it's like they go in one ear and out the other. I don't know why. I think it's probably just because the universe is like, you don't need this information. It's okay. You can let other people do it.
Yeah,
So.
exactly. I know it's so complex. Astrology is one of those things where it's like, there's like 10 layers to it. And also you never stop learning. Like I've been studying astrology since I was in high school. It's been over, 10, 12 years. And I'm constantly still learning new techniques and new things.
Oh, I'm sure.
And astrocartography is very new. It came out in the 70s, 1970s. Jim Lewis was the famous astrologer who founded it, who created it. He left his legacy behind with this work. And he also trademarked the name. I mean, it's a huge creation that, he founded in the 70s. And so the 70s, I mean, that's really not that long ago. And we've come such a long way since then. We've discovered local space lines. We've discovered the relocation chart. So there's so much more to it. I know astrology is so complicated.
It really is. It really is. And I have so much just admiration for people who are able to like have it lock into their brain and make so much sense. I love hearing about it and I love hearing what it means and how it affects your life and everything else. It's just funny that the terminology and then all the houses. I was just having a conversation with my sister the other day. And she was just saying something about, I don't know, where Pisces was landing because of, I don't know, something's
Saturn.
Going on astrologically. Yeah, maybe it's Saturn. Yeah.
Pisces,
Yeah. And so she was asking me, she's like, do you know what? And I was like, I don't know. She goes, well, pull up your chart. I was like, okay. So I pulled up my chart. She goes, what does it mean? Or what does it say? And I was like, I don't know. I have no idea.
Yeah. A great way I love to describe astrology is, you have your birth chart and you have the houses, which are like the setting or the scene of where the play is taking place. So it's like, your life movie, your biography, and you've got these little houses, which are like the settings of the different scenes of the play. And then in those houses or those areas of life, whether it's money, marriage, friendship, career, right? We have all these different little scenes. But in those scenes, you have characters and actors. And the actors that are playing in those scenes are the planets. And so they're located in certain scenes of your story. And then those actors, planets, are also colored in a flavor, which is the sign that it's in. So like having, Venus in Taurus, Venus is the actor, but it's in Taurus. So the character that actor is playing, the costume, the way it behaves, the way it, expresses itself, communicates all of these things, it's kind of coloring that, actor in that certain setting. And then on top of that, we can add the fourth layer, which is the relationships between the characters. And those are the aspects. And the aspects are, if you pull up your chart, you can see the different lines of between planets. And so it's kind of like their relationship to one another. Are they in helpful relationships? Are they benefiting one another? Are they, causing the other to be more frustrated? That's kind of the main like analogy I like to use with astrology, but it's really a play. It's really a performance.
I love that. I love that so much. Thank you so much for that explanation because it makes a lot of sense the way that you're describing it. Absolutely. Yeah. The next question I have regarding vacations, let's say, well, and actually this could possibly go for your relocation as well, because, there are people, especially more people on the planet now are becoming digital nomads. So like they're going from place to place to place. And let's say if you're on a vacation and There's one vacation specifically that's coming to mind where I just happened to visit 3 different friends in 3 different places. And we went from London to Wales to Budapest and then to Rome, like the most weirdly disjointed collection of countries that we decided to go to. But it was just, that's how the trip planned out. So how do you navigate that? Like if there are multiple countries involved or if somebody is a digital nomad, so to speak?
Yeah, well, I would say each place that you go to is going to have a different energy.
Yeah.
So like, let's say, you're going with a friend or your partner or something, your partner may feel one way in a country and you may feel completely different. And when you go to these different places, you may just, the quality of your life is the main thing that really changes when you go to different places. It's like the feeling, the emotion, how you're doing in that place. And so, going from for example, a Mars line where if you're traveling in Budapest and you've got a Mars line going there, there's a lot more ambition, more productive. You're doing a lot, you're juggling a lot, you're going to lots of places. And you could feel like just your energy spikes up higher. It's a fast energy. It's also, the courageous leadership. You could just feel more ambitious there. Then if you decide to, take a train and go to your moon line, it's going to be a more inward experience. You're going to feel more going within. You're going to want to, connect with nature more. You might want to focus on your social relationships and have that vulnerability and those heart-led discussions. It's a softer, more internal energy. And so that's the amazing thing about like nomads and like traveling is like you can kind of experience the full experience of life by going to these different places and feeling what this is like. And so for nomads, my biggest tip is to, look up your cyclocartography, which is like timing your trips so that you're going at a time when you're kind of using that energy in a great way. Or let's say you wrote a book and you want to launch it and have it be well received or, very successful. You could go and time your trips on certain lines so that there's kind of more a focus on that, on the publicity, the promotion of that thing. So yeah, kind of timing your trip, but also recognizing that, your energy just may change. You may just feel different when you go to these different places.
Okay, if anybody out there listening right now is trying to plan their digital nomad or their nomadic lifestyle, definitely contact Helena and she will be able to help you find all of those different places that are going to be in alignment for you.
And it's wild. I like to go on solo trips a lot. And I recently, a couple months ago, I took a train up through the UK, like up through Scotland and England. And I knew the main line that I was on, but I didn't want to look at the parans in the beginning because I wanted to kind of experience it first and kind of sense intuitively what the energy was like there.
Sure.
As I was traveling, taking trains up north, that whole experience, I felt so Neptunian. I felt so dreamy. I felt so kind of lost, creative. I was writing poetry in cafes every day. I was feeling very creative and imaginative and doing so much meditation work and subconscious work. And I felt that way as I was going through a certain area. And so I kind of, jotted that down in my notebook and documented the data. And then when I got, home and I looked at all of the information, it was like, in that one area, I was going through all these Sun Neptune parans, these Neptune North Node parans. That's exactly what that experience that I felt was there in that certain pocket of the UK. And so I love to do this. I travel so much. I was just in Italy for a couple weeks ago. And it was the same thing. It's like I looked at my cyclocartography and I planned my trip so that I could be on a certain line at a certain time. I planned it by the week so that I could have kind of harness that energy at that moment. So it's quite fascinating. Yeah.
That's the other thing is that like, obviously people listening to this podcast, everybody has their own ways in which they are connecting to their intuition. And one of my big ways is through the Akashic records, but then also I get signs everywhere, like absolutely everywhere. And you just gave me a sign in this podcast. So.
Oh my gosh. And that's so cool. That you open the Akashic records, all of my best ideas, the best things I've taken action on with my life, the messages I've gotten, they've all come from the records. And starting my YouTube channel, I started it before COVID and I got the message in the records to start it. And I was like, I don't know what to say. What do I say? And I was, and I've been told, to start the astrocartography, to make a video, to blog a post. And it was all in either the records or meditation, but often it's the records.
Yeah. Oh my God. That's so cool. I love that. So it was just like, you're basically tapping into that universal knowledge and they're like, yep, this is it for you.
Yeah. Oh, it's amazing. And how do you get, a lot of your messages in the records? Do you kind of see movie clips? Do you this is kind of going off topic, but do you get sensory
yeah.
experiences? Do you get visuals? Do you get colors? What do you sense when you're in the records?
So I get a combination of things. So when I'm reading for myself, it's more in the visual aspect. So I see like a little movie going on behind my eyes.
Yeah.
I will occasionally get the sort of audio messages. When I'm in client sessions, I get pretty much like all of the above. So I will get, the movies, I will get the words coming in. I will get full on channels. So literally like one of my guides, my Akashic guide might even take over and say, you don't know anything about this as a human. So like, I need to channel this information so it's more clear. Right. So yeah, it's a little combination of everything actually.
Have you ever gone and opened the records right before sleep and then like slept through the records and had any, profound dreams or anything like that? I actually did that this week and I received like an insane dream. But yeah, I was curious, what do you think on that? Do you think it's good to do that? Or do you think it's important to close the records right before you go to sleep?
It's super important to close the records for me personally, just because it gives me a pretty big headache because basically you're leaving the records open to basically like you're getting like a direct blast of that beautiful, high, potent energy. And so our physical bodies have a tendency not to be able to handle that too well. So that's just me personally. Yeah. Some people might be able to have them open all day long and be fine. Yeah. The other aspect of that is, so when you open the records, you can tap into universal healing as well. So I have actually done that on occasion where I've opened the records, tapped into the universal healing if I'm working on something that I'm healing within my physical body. So I will leave them open at night and set the intention with my Akashic guide to close the records when the healing is complete. So it's not necessarily leaving them open all night. It's like, okay, I'm setting the intention for this work to be done. And then when it's done, close them.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Oh, that's so cool. I love talking about this. I don't have a lot of people in my life that I talk to because I don't know many people who open the records. So it's such a joy. Thank you for sharing.
Oh yeah, we can have all kinds of discussions about that.
Yeah.
Okay, so what are some of the common misconceptions of astrocartography? Like if you are having somebody who's wanting to book a session with you or has booked a session, what are those misconceptions that they might have?
One of the things I'm so passionate about sharing about astrocartography is looking at the birth chart, because I have seen, astrocartography has been trending on TikTok and so many social media, Instagram, and there's just a lot of, generalities. And the thing about when something becomes really popular or becomes really trendy is that it simplifies it. We tend to oversimplify techniques or techniques that are very complex, and there's a lot to look at, and it's not kind of a simple answer. And, I've seen so many TikToks or people talking about astrocartography and saying you should go to this line because it's a great line. And generally that can be true, but it all depends on someone's birth chart. It all depends on specifically how is that planet placed in the birth chart. For instance, if someone has a really hard moon, like their natal moon is in a difficult position, maybe it's in Scorpio or, in its fall, or maybe it's got a hard aspect from Mars or Pluto or Saturn, that moon is kind of debilitated in a sense. It's kind of, there can be this sense of being overly emotional or going through paranoia or going through just some difficult emotional things in that location if they're going to a moon line. So telling someone just go to a moon line, it can be difficult because it all depends on the person. It all depends on that person's relationship with the moon. And so my first tip for anyone who wants to get into astrocartography is to really look at your natal chart, study, the relationships that the planets have with one another, specifically what sign that planet is in, and if it's happy or not happy, depending on the sign that it's located in. And that's just essential dignities. You could Google essential dignities and find all the positions, but that's the main thing. And then the other thing, a lot of people, think you need to move right to a line. A lot of people think you need to move directly to a line, or they'll say, my line's in the ocean. I can't move to the ocean. It's like, but you can, be 400 miles off of it and you're still getting those effects. So I think that's the other main thing that a lot of people assume about it. And then also looking at parans. Parans are so important. You can't see them on software like astro.com. If you go to astro.com, there's an AstroClick travel feature where you can see your lines, but they don't include parans, and parans are so important. So that would be the next thing, is they really have a dramatic effect on a location. So even if you move, let's say you move to a great line and you have a great line in your chart, and so you go to that place in the world, if you move just an hour or 2 hours north or south, you're going to get a different experience just based on that paran. So those would be like the top 3 things that is so important about astrocartography that I'm so passionate about sharing.
To add to that, if anyone out there is looking at short form videos, so Instagram, TikTok, any of those things, and getting information and taking that as, sort of the be all end all of information, I would encourage you to actually do more research. If something interests you, do more research, go to an actual like long form YouTube channel, or, do something else to actually research it, because the short form videos are great to pique your interest, but they're there exactly for that, to pique your interest. And then, you need to sort of go within, check in with your intuition and see if this is something that you want to delve further into.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And social media is so great for it's being inspiring, inspiring other people to look into something or piquing someone's interest. Exactly. But things like astrology, it's so complicated. It's so complex. There's so many layers to it. And there's so many ancient techniques that, requires a lot of study. And so my recommendation is like, get the inspiration from there, but then check out some books, check out some astrocartography books, take a course, or just really play with your chart and your map on your own in your free time. But yeah, that's really important.
I do have one last question, but before we get to that last question, this is actually a really good segue, because you mentioned possibly, for people to research a course, and you are in fact working on an astrocartography course.
Yes. Yeah. My first course, I'm really excited about it. I've been doing so much work on it, but I'm going to help people break down, the relocated chart, the angles, the degrees, to see, what are the main key events or things that are happening in certain parts of the world for them. And in this course, it'll be about 5-6 weeks. And, if you're a beginner, if you're new to astrology and you have no idea what this stuff is, I'm going to be walking you through the basics. And then every week we're going to progress and add another layer to it. And so you can be able to learn your own map, but also the energies of the world for your friends and the people in your life. And yeah, I'm working on that right now. It'll be out later this year, probably early June. And so if anyone wants to, look into that or check that out when it comes available, I have a email link, a newsletter link. So if anyone wants to sign up and get notified when it comes out, you can sign up and be notified when it's available.
For everyone who does want to sign up for Helena's newsletter, please head to her website. It is helenawoods.com. HELENAWOODS.com. Okay, so the last question that I have for you today is actually just sort of talking about when you have this session with a client, you've given them all of their options, and they're like, none of these places are resonating with me. Has that ever happened? And if it has, what do you do?
Yeah, it's happened once. So I started doing readings a year ago, and I've had hundreds of clients in just the last year, but I've had one person who didn't resonate with any of the places. And when that happens, I wonder if they're, partly it's just like, are you open-minded to the different places, or are you open to traveling or moving? But more often than not, 99% of the time, the places I mention randomly, like the specific locations, are often places that they have always felt called to go to, or they know that they need to go there. Or lately, before the reading, they've had like 4 people tell them they need to go to the specific city or the specific region in this state or wherever. And when I tell them, it's always like a goosebump moment of, oh my God, I've known this, I've been sensing this. And I just, looked at it just from looking at the chart and looking at the map. And so that always happens. Like there's always that, yes, I know. And then, for every reading, there's always like one surprising place that I always like to share with people. Because often people will say like just Europe or just, the US, but then I'll random a random island that's really great for them, or, a specific awesome part of Asia or a specific part of like Iceland or something where it's the energy is really magical for them. So I always like to include like one surprising place where they just like, ooh, that's interesting. I never thought of that. I love those moments. Yeah, 99% of the time it's always people who have like sensed that resonance. But yeah, I've only had one client where like she didn't feel connected to any of the places. And in that case, it's just like, I don't know what to say,
Yeah. And you know what? It could be one of those situations where that person may need to have an experience in their life where they are going through maybe challenging energies. Maybe that's their path, So
Mhm.
yeah, you never know. So I kind of feel like even if you go to a place that maybe is not as harmonious as another, there's
Mhm.
always going to be a lesson in there. There's always going to be a reason for it. And you're always going to be able to take something else from it. It's
Yeah.
just about your own personal attitude and how you're going to move through that situation.
Yeah, and I think something that's really important with astrocartography, it's so important to be open-minded. Like obviously we can cross off, certain parts of the world, like maybe you don't want to move to certain pockets of the US or certain parts of the world. We can cross that out. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
But then to the places that you are kind of more neutral about, just having that open-mindedness of what could be there,
Right.
what am I closed off to that maybe I could be a bit more open to kind of get that wisdom or get that energy, get that inspiration from that little pocket, even if it's not to relocate, but just to travel, just to experience it. Maybe, especially if we're looking at the map and, there's like a moon north node paran where it's like the importance of community or an important person that you're meeting in a specific spot. There can be fated events or fated meetings with people that are really important for that person. And maybe they don't have an interest in going there, but there's something that's there for them. So we can, see that in the map. And then also knowing that when you're looking at your relocated charts, your astrocartography, know that not every place is going to be 100% perfect. There's always going to be something that's not 100%, amazing about a place.
Yeah.
And no place has that, just being open-minded, being curious, and just being open-minded is really important.
Definitely. Okay, I said that was the last question, and I totally fibbed. Okay, so because what you were just talking about brought up another question in my head, which is we've been kind of talking about like what you do for you, like as a solo traveler or as somebody who is moving on their own. Do you do sessions for couples? Let's say if they're looking to relocate somewhere or looking to go on a vacation together, can you do the two charts together and kind of come up with something that's going to be harmonious for both?
Oh yeah, definitely. I can always find one location that's perfect that couples like. I do single clients and then I also do, couples. And my main goal when looking at couples charts is finding a place that it's good for both of them. I find if one person's having a really hard time in one location, but the other person has amazing things going on, it can really offset the balance because, we lean on our partner. We're around our partner all the time. If they're going through a really hard time with the energy there, it's going to influence us and how we feel. And so I would rather find a place where one person has amazing lines and then the other person has neutral, but it's not, terrible. It's not like a really hard line that they're on, but rather it's a bit more neutral. It's a bit more settled. I always try to find that for someone, but you'd be surprised. So many times I can find a good place for two people. And then, you could look into the kids' charts and you can add, the children and like their experience there, because that also plays a part. Yeah. So, and it's interesting because so often when I'm doing readings for couples, often there will be one person who is on a really hard line where they're living. And, when I express, or explain the, the significations of this place or like the themes, the stories, the lessons that came from this specific line in relation to the birth chart, one of them will always be like, oh, well, why did I move here? Was it a waste of my time? Like, I regret this. It's like, no, like not at all. This wasn't, this was part of the plan. This was part of your divine plan. And
Right.
I'm a big believer that everything in our lives is happening for a reason. There's no need to doubt or worry or question it. And that's the thing about astrology is that it's a mirror reflecting everything. And it shows how purposeful and intentional our lives here on earth and how everything is so divinely timed. And if someone's meant to be on a hard line for a part of their life, there's a reason for it. There's something that they're supposed to get from that place.
Absolutely.
And it's part of the natal promise. And so that's why I always say, trust where you're led, trust where your intuition is guiding you. Even if it's a harder place, like you're meant to get something from that place, whether it's a person or a lesson or a job or something, there's always something for us everywhere, but it's just being open and following that intuitive knowing.
Oh, that's so beautiful and so true. And I think that's a great place to end because there's nothing more to say because that's exactly it. That's exactly it. Beautifully said. How can people get a hold of you on social media? We've given the website already, but you have an incredible YouTube channel. You've got Instagram, you've got all of that. So if you can just sort of tell us what your handles are.
Yeah, I'm on YouTube. So I have my main YouTube channel, which is Helena Woods. And I, talk about intuitive living, slow living. I share my life living abroad. And then my Astrocartography YouTube channel, which is Astrocartography with Helena. I post videos specifically about astrology and astrocartography and timing techniques. And then my website is my main hangout spot. I've got my blog, my readings, my courses, everything you want to know is all on my website at helenawoods.com. I do have an Instagram. It's kind of more my personal life though. So if you want to see the personal stuff, it's Ms. Helena Woods.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Helena, I'm so glad that you joined me today. This has been super enlightening, and I can't wait to actually connect with you, get a session with you, and talk about the next steps for me, not only for vacation, but for location, all of those things. I'm super excited about it. And I hope that everyone out there who has listened to this episode is super excited about finding out where they're going next.
Have an amazing day and never stop exploring your soul, because it is the most important relationship you will ever have. If you are interested in learning more about me and the sessions that I do, feel free to go to my website at infinitesoullove.com.
On all social media, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at Infinite Soul Love 1111.
Hey, and if you feel called, I would love it if you could rate The Heart of You on whatever streaming service you're using, whether it's Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Please take a moment, give it a review. It really does help the channel. Thanks so much.